guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is a suggested case of Sarah Payne. This case was actually suggested by Lucy, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions that you guys have. I'd just like to let you know, I mean no disrespect whatsoever to anyone I'm going to talk about today. I've just gathered this information off the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. Sarah Evelyn Isabel Payne was born on the 13th of October in 1991 to Michael and Sarah Payne. She had two older brothers, Lee and Luke, and she had one younger sister, Charlotte. The family lived in Harlem in Surrey in England. On the 1st of July 2000, Sarah and Charlotte, her younger sister, went to work with their mother. She actually worked in a pub. Michael was actually at home at the time sleeping. He worked night shifts, and so obviously he would sleep kind of during the morning and the day and then go on to do his night shift at night. Sarah went on to finish a shift and she brought the girls back home, which Michael was awake at this point. They started packing and they were going to go to the seaside that evening, so they started getting rid of everything together and getting ready to go out. Michael's parents, Les and Terry, actually lived on the coast in Sussex, and they would try and visit at least once a month if they could. They hadn't been there for a while. It was a lovely day. It was glorious sunshine. It was the weekend. And obviously his parents were expecting them, so when they got there they ate dinner together as a family, and then the children went to play outside whilst the adults cleaned up. They then decided that they would go for a walk on the seafront. Like I said, it was a beautiful day. The kids were out playing in the sand and on the beach. They went and sat on the beach for a while and watched the children play, and then Terry actually suggested that they go for a walk to the village because one of his friends had been working on a house in there and he wanted to show them it. So the boys, Lee and Luke, actually wanted to stay behind. They wanted to carry on playing. At the time, I believe they were 13 and 11, around about that age, and they were kind of given a bit more freedom because they were a bit older, so they were allowed to explore a little bit more on their own. And so the parents trusted them. They weren't going that far away. The village was very close. Just under 100 yards was the grandparents' house because, like I said, it was pretty much on the beachfront. They weren't too far away from people. So the parents actually agreed to this. They let the boys stay behind. But Charlotte and Sarah also wanted to stay behind. Now, Charlotte was 6 and Sarah was 8. And they just wanted to carry on playing with the brothers. The parents figured, well, we're not going too far away, like I said. The boys, they could trust the boys to look after these girls. So they gave them strict instructions and basically said, if you get tired or I don't know, you get fed up and you don't want to play out anymore, go to your grandmother's house, which was, like I said, 100 yards away. And so they went into the village to look at this house. Whilst they was on this walk, they actually went to the pub and they spent, I believe, around about 20 minutes in this pub before they began the walk back to the house.
And as we got to the house, Les was standing outside, which I thought was very, very unusual. She was holding Charlotte tightly by the hand and the boys were sort of around. She said, have you got Sarah? And then the boys chirped in, you know, I can't find her, so it was that quick.
Obviously, panic set in straight away. Where was Sarah? Sarah just ran straight to the end of the road. She began searching for her, shouting her name, and the entire family followed. Everyone started looking for her. They were searching the fields, they were searching the roads, the beach, they were just searching absolutely everywhere. Maybe she'd wandered off, maybe she'd gotten lost and didn't know her way back. Like I said, this was a grandparent's house, it wasn't her house. So although they did visit a lot, she was young, maybe she just didn't know her way back. She wandered out a little bit too far and didn't know how to get home. At the same time, Sarah was quite a shy girl. She was the kind of little girl that would never really go off on her own. She would never really go off with anybody else. And so, rightly so, they were just worried. So they tried to piece together what had happened. They asked the boys about Sarah's last kind of known moments, where she was, things like that, to try and just see what had happened to her. They stated that they were all playing a game, I believe it was hide and seek, correct me if I'm wrong, but they was playing a game in these cornfields, which was very close to the beach, and Sarah actually fell over. She hurt herself, and in kind of anger and upset and a bit of a little tantrum, she just decided that she wanted to go back to her grandmother's house, which is Understandable. She'd hurt herself. She was 8, so she wanted to go back. And Lee, being the oldest brother, decided that he was going to go with her. It was his duty to look after her. He would leave Luke behind with obviously little Charlotte, and Luke could look after Charlotte while he went after Sarah. He was literally like a couple of seconds behind her. When he heard Luke shouting and Charlotte crying, she had also fallen over and hurt herself. So he turned around for literally a split second to see whether his brother and sister were okay. A second later, he turned back around and Sarah had gone. She'd literally just vanished. They searched the area for over an hour. They asked anyone and everyone if they'd seen her. People joined in to help because they could see obviously how panicked her family were and how worried that this 8-year-old girl had just gone. It was now around 8 p.m. and it was getting dark. And so even though they had the help of people, they decided that they needed more and they rang the police.
Emergency, which service?
Please, have a look for my daughter.
Police, thank you.
Can I call you through the police emergency? What's the problem?
I've lost my 8-year-old daughter. She's been missing about an hour and 3/4 now.
The search for Sarah was immediately their top priority. They took officers off of the cases to put them onto this case. The police arrived around 9 p.m. and the family told them everything that they knew. They searched the area, basically looking for Sarah if she had fallen down a ditch or anything like that. As I said, possibly she could have wandered off. Maybe she'd gotten lost and didn't realise. Maybe she'd fallen down a hole or a ditch or anything and she was just there frightened and scared and didn't know what to do. Maybe she was injured. Maybe she was stuck. Anything could have happened to her, but also she could have been abducted, which was the other side of it. Now, I do believe that initially they didn't kind of sway more towards the fact that she'd just been playing and gotten lost, but the more time they spent searching the surrounding area, the further they got out and further away from the home and they still couldn't find her, they started swaying more towards that she'd been abducted. They literally found nothing on the searches, absolutely nothing. And as they were searching this, they had police at the house and they decided to speak to the boys again to try and see whether they kind of saw anything at all that may be relevant to the case. That was when Lee actually stated that he had seen 2 vehicles on the road by the field. He had seen a car and a white van. He said that the man in the van looked literally directly straight at him. He smiled and waved before zooming off. He sped away so quickly. They felt that possibly this man could have had something to do with Sarah's abduction. The search went into the next day, but they found nothing. The story spread like wildfire. This story did eventually become kind of national news, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people looking for this little girl. And time was of the essence. If this was an abduction, the longer it is, the less likely you are to get your child back safe. So obviously, they try and pull out all the stops. They try and do everything just to get this little girl back safely, because the longer that she is missing, like I said, the less likely she's going to be returned safely. Because just time is so much of the essence in these cases. So it's normal standard protocol to interview any sex offenders in the area when children have gone missing. So that's what they began to do. So the police went and spoke to a sex offender called Roy Whitting as part of their normal inquiries. Roy, like I said, was a known sex offender to the police, and he was very high up in their suspicions. Roy previously had actually been charged with child abduction of an 8-year-old girl, which was the same age as Sarah. He got a 4-year prison sentence, of which he spent 2.5 years there. For abducting an 8-year-old girl, he only spent 2.5 years. It's actually said that he received a lesser punishment for this crime because he actually admitted to it really early. And during trial and things like that, he was actually seen by a psychiatrist who assessed him after his conviction. And this psychiatrist stated that he was very likely to reoffend. So he spent 2.5 years in jail. He was then released, and this psychiatrist believed that he was very, very likely to reoffend. And now Sarah Payne was missing, an 8-year-old little girl. So Roy served his time. He was put on the sex offenders list, and then he moved to the seaside around families with lots of children. Back to the police interview, he gave the police an alibi. He said that he was alone at a fun fair in Brighton, and also that he didn't actually own a white van. Whilst questioning him, they did think that he looked and was acting very suspicious. And so when the police went outside to leave his house, they just sat there for a while. They thought they'd sit behind and they'd watch him and see what he did next. Well, a few seconds later, Roy comes out of the house and he goes over to a white van and he unlocks the door. So having said that he didn't own a white van, he's now going to this a white van and he has the keys. So obviously he was lying about something. As he opened the door, a piece of paper fell out. And this piece of paper was a receipt for petrol. The officers went over and they picked it up. And it was actually a receipt for petrol from the Pulborough area the same day that Sarah Payne went missing, when he claimed he was in Brighton. Now, obviously, he could have just filled up his car on his way to Brighton, on his way home. It's not proof of anything, but it kind of put suspicion on his alibi straight away. Roy was actually arrested on suspicion of abduction. He was held for 48 hours, but they had no proof, they had nothing concrete, and so they had to let him go. Other people were also questioned, but nothing really came of that either. On the 3rd of July, Sarah and Michael made their first public appeal. They were on television, they were so emotional, and they were just asking for the safe return of their little princess. They did go on to make quite a few TV appeals, and like I said, this case did go national. It just was well known everywhere. It went like huge, and the efforts for it were huge to try and find Sarah. It had amassed over 500 police officers, not including volunteers, friends, family members, community people, just all out there looking for her and doing their part to try and find this little girl. The police search intensified and a second man from Crawley was actually arrested, but he was later released too, without any charge. Police officers and numerous volunteers searched the area around Littlehampton for clues on Sarah's disappearance. As I said, her family kind of made daily news appeals to try and get any information from the public whatsoever, and lots of tips came in, lots of sightings came in. They pretty much came in their thousands, and all of them followed up, but unfortunately none of the sightings or anything like that were actually Sarah. Ever since very early on in this case, the police were kind of trying to prepare Sarah's parents in a sense for the worst. Because like I said, the chances of actually getting her back at this point were just so very low. On the 10th of July, police actually announced that they had this information regarding a sighting of a girl that matched Sarah's description at Knutsford Services, sort of the day after her disappearance. 3 days after that, that was when police really kind of did home in and warn her parents to really prepare for the worst, explaining that their inquiries had kind of shifted and that there was a high possibility that their daughter might not be found safe and well. On the 17th of July, which was now 16 days after Sarah had gone missing, a farmer was working on his field near Pulborough when he disturbed a patch of land and he uncovered the body of a little girl. It was just 15 miles away from where Sarah had gone missing, and there were no other children missing at the time, so it was pretty much believed that it probably was Sarah Payne. The next day, the body was identified as being that of Sarah Payne, and her official cause of death was ruled as suspected strangulation or suffocation or a combination of both. She had been sexually assaulted and suffered quite a violent death in a sexually motivated attack. Her body was very badly decomposed, making it kind of impossible to reveal any injuries that she'd suffered. She was found naked in dry vegetation with it all kind of attached to her body. Most of her hair had come away at the roots. As the news of Sarah's body being found spread, the police actually received a call from a woman who had seen a shoe at Coolin Crossroads. Now, this lady had seen this shoe, but she just didn't really think much of it. She presumed that, obviously, kids lose things all the time. It was a little shoe. Maybe this child had lost this shoe and were looking for it, so she didn't think much of it. But then Sarah's body was found near that area, and a week later, she went back to check whether the shoe was still there, and it was still there. So clearly nobody was out looking for this shoe, and she actually believed that maybe it was Sarah's. So she reported it to the police. They took it into the evidence and began searching that area. Meanwhile, Roy Whitting had moved. He'd gone to live with his father in Crawley to try and kind of get away from it. Obviously, he was a suspect and everyone knew. So he wanted to get out of it and sort of move away from it. And when the people in Crawley found out that he was a suspect, they began kind of vandalising his father's house, throwing bricks through the window, things like that. And so Roy went on to camp in the woods. He was just trying to get away from it. On Sunday, the 23rd of July, Roy went on to steal a Vauxhall Nova. Now, Roy was under police surveillance 24/7. They watched everything he did. Obviously, he was a high suspect in this case, so they were watching every little movement he made. And so they actually saw him steal this car. They chased him, and it actually led to a high-speed chase that went on for a very long time, reaching speeds of over kind of 70 miles an hour before Roy eventually crashed into a parked car. And obviously that was when the police arrested him and took him in for questioning. They also questioned him on Sarah's case once more, and they decided to search this van that he didn't own. They found that he had literally bought this van a few days before Sarah's disappearance. It was a furniture van, and they have these wood cladding on the inside, which could kind of be perfect to clean it up, because you could just remove this wood cladding if there was any DNA or anything like that inside of it, just totally remove it and burn it all. So obviously they meticulously searched this van, they did the forensics on it, and they didn't really find anything until eventually they did find one blonde hair. This, along with the shoe, was sent off for testing. And this shoe would actually be very pinnacle to this case. And it was such a vital piece of evidence, because this shoe had a fibre on it that was actually matched some items of clothing found in Roy's van. The blonde hair did come back as being 1 in a billion chance of it belonging to anyone other than Sarah Payne. So that was what tied it all in. The police went into Roy's prison cell and they arrested him right there and then, because he was already serving time for obviously the car chase. So they just went into his prison cell and they arrested him once more for Sarah's murder. In February of 2001, Roy pleaded not guilty to all charges. And of course another trial was set for November. Once more he pleaded not guilty, but the evidence against him was just overwhelming. The trial only lasted 19 days before Roy Whittle was found guilty on all charges, including abduction and murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with a maximum of 50 years. His sentence was appealed in 2010 and it was reduced to 40 years, but Roy would at least be in his 90s before he was liable for parole, and it is believed that even if he did live to that age, that they wouldn't grant him parole at that age, and so essentially he would serve a life sentence pretty much. After Roy was convicted, his past was kind of made public and all his past sexual offences were kind of just laid out for everyone to see. Initially it was hidden from the jury because obviously they didn't want it to sway their decision, but when the trial was over and he was found guilty, they let it all out and the public were furious, Sarah's family were furious. And that was when it prompted Sarah, her mother, to actually, and her father Michael, to kind of head this campaign for Sarah's Law. She was just completely outraged, and so was a lot of other people, that this sex offender was just allowed to live freely around children when the parents didn't have a clue about his past. Sarah's Law actually allows the public to know when a sex offender moves in your area, so I believe that they receive a letter. And then if you want to look it up further and look into it more, you can go online and you can actually find out where these people live. This was led by both the parents, like I said. And in 2011, the Child Sex Disclosure Scheme was rolled out by police forces across the country. On the 31st of December, Sarah was actually awarded an MBE for her work to help keep children safe. Her parents were obviously totally devastated by their daughter's murder, as obviously anyone would be. Michael did suffer with severe depression and alcoholism, and the couple actually separated in 2003. In 2004, at the age of just 45, Michael passed away alone in his home after obviously battling all of these things, which did stem from when his little 8-year-old girl was murdered. Roy is still serving his time in prison, and he's been attacked a few times by a few different inmates. This monster stole a little 8-year-old girl's life, and he tore her family apart. Obviously, the law which came out as a result of this is something to be proud of. It kind of gives a legacy for Sarah, and it means that her death wasn't in vain. Obviously, we you would just want your child back. But at least this law helped to keep other children safer. And some good did come out of this horrible crime that was committed. My heart really does go out to Sarah and her family, and I truly found this case really, really sad. Hopefully these changes can help cases like these to kind of not really happen as often, where parents can actually check to see whether there's a sex offender in their area. This information is just important to be aware of when you have children. But yeah, if you guys have any more suggestions, please do let me know. I'll look into them for you. If you have any comments on this case or anything like that, leave it in the comments below. We can discuss it all together and share our information. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're new here and you want to see similar content. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Sarah Payne. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!